But first, obviously, when things go wrong, the most urgent task is to fix the problem. But if mistakes have no consequences, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that there'll be a lot more mistakes. And when the mistakes are by government, it also weakens our trust in the system. Given that the rest of us are all subject to laws and fines, it also creates a sense that there are two sets of rules, one for us and one for MPs and the bureaucracy. Now, whenever there's a monumental stuff-up by government, there's almost always demands for an inquiry, and fair enough too, as long as the inquiry isn't just a smokescreen for politicians to hide behind or for those responsible to avoid responsibility. Usually these days, rather than get to the bottom of the matter, we're usually just told, aren't we, that there's some sort of problem with the system. Not anyone's fault, certainly not a minister's, but the system, they tell us. And that then ends up with everyone backside covering and adding in more regulations and rules rather than owning up that the problem might never have happened if a more competent person was in the job in the first place. At least the recent Ruby Princess inquiry hasn't recommended a new system. It's just admonished all the people in the system to do their job better after finding the inexcusable and inexplicable mistakes had been made, especially by the New South Wales Health Department's so-called expert panel. Ultimately, more than 900 people on this supposedly low-risk ship tested positive for coronavirus and 22 lives were lost. Ruby Princess passengers are thought to be responsible for further disease clusters, including one in Tasmania, which resulted in 10 further deaths. Despite the catastrophic consequences of letting all the passengers stream off the ship at 2:30 in the morning, mind you, and then scatter to the four winds, the inquiry did not call for anyone to be sacked or indeed disciplined. Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier, has apologised. Brad Hazzard, the Health Minister, has apologised. Kerry Sutton, the Chief Health Officer, has apologised. But no one has resigned. Once that was how we held ministers and public servants accountable. If they stuffed up, the person in charge would do the honourable thing and resign, because public servants under a minister's stewardship failing to do their job meant the minister fell on their sword. But not so in this case, and it's not good enough in my book. The Premier's apology no doubt was genuine, Hazzard's too. But if accountability is to mean anything, Hazzard should go. And if you won't do the right thing and resign, then the Premier needs to get herself a backbone and move him on. A few years back, Bronwyn Bishop resigned over a helicopter charter flight that was inside the rules. I know the rules, I administered the rules, it was inside the rules, but it was way outside what taxpayers regarded as fair. Barry O'Farrell, well, he quit as New South Wales Premier over a bottle of fancy wine that someone in his office failed to log and declare. And yet here we have lives lost. Not a $5,000 flight on a chopper or a $3,000 bottle of Grange. Everyone, though, responsible on that day for those decisions in relation to the Ruby Princess, every one of them has their job, when thousands around Australia do not. And for them, the unemployed, all unemployed because of the virus, well, it's through no fault of their own. From where I sit, just apologising and moving on is not good enough for an episode with such disastrous consequences. A motorist who's made gross errors leading to a fatal crash would not avoid a culpable driving charge. A business owner whose inexplicable and inexcusable errors had led to deaths would not escape an industrial manslaughter conviction either. So why should a minister be able to wash his hands of inexcusable and inexplicable errors by his subordinates with a quick apology? When they're put on the front bench, every minister automatically receives the title of honourable. It might actually be worth something if, before they got it, they earned it and they kept up the honourable in order to keep it. The Ruby Princess mess and the ongoing crisis in Victoria, well, surely voters are entitled to better.